During the extreme lows of 1988, we saw the saltwater wedge reach all the way up to Kenner, Louisiana.
A northern drought and a gentle southeast wind nudged the saltwater upriver.
It's been since day one Plaquemines Parish has had to deal with this situation.
28,000 Plaquemine Parish residents hit hardest by the saltwater's invasion.
We potentially could see the saltwater wedge all the way up to the French Quarter, but we have no intention of not taking any action.
Well, tonight we're learning much more about the saltwater intrusion emergency on the Mississippi River and how local leaders are responding to keep the drinking water safe. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Cherise Gibson. The Army Corps of Engineers says the saltwater wedge coming up the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico is now a top priority at the highest levels of government. And today they gave an update on plans to protect our drinking water. Meg Ferris was there. She joins me now in studio. Meg, can you break this down for me?
Absolutely, Cherise. So here's what's happening. The Gulf saltwater is pushing its way up the Mississippi River, not because of the lack of rain we've had here in southeast Louisiana, but because of low rainfall up in the Ohio Valley, and it's forecast to stay dry. To fight back on Gulf waters, the Army Corps of Engineers built an underwater sill, a levee-looking structure, to hold the heavier saltwater back. But here's the problem.
The current conditions persist. It will not be able to prevent overtopping of the sill by salt water, but it can delay it.
That means the saltwater will keep traveling upriver, hitting the water purification intake systems in more parishes, as happened before.
During the extreme lows of 1988, we saw the saltwater wedge reach all the way up to Kenner, Louisiana. Based off the current forecast and projections, if no action is taken, we potentially could see the saltwater wedge all the way up to the French Quarter.
The projection is saltwater will overtop the sill around September 22nd and impact fresh water intakes at Belle Chase by October 3rd.
Since June 19th, we've been working on this situation, and it's been a trial beyond trials here. But we're gonna succeed in this.
In Lower Plaquemines, already 1.5 million liters of water have been delivered to 2,000 people, and there are other problems.
Because of the drought, a lot of breaks in the lines, and when that happens, your water pressure drops down. So the water's not able to be pushed up to the second and third floor of your facilities. It's very corrosive. So what we've experienced in the southern end of the parish is some of the your ice machines, your coffee pots, just your appliances in general. It's very corrosive.
So there are action plans. Dredging will make the sill 20 feet higher while keeping a lower channel for ship traffic. As was done in 1988, fresh water will be brought on barges and mixed with the salt water at water intake plants. And special water filtration machines will be stationed at smaller water intake plants that remove salt, grit, and dirt, taking a normal 3-step processing of water to more like 10 steps. Now, that reverse osmosis water purification unit for saltwater is expected to be brought in on a truck and connected in the next few days at the East Point Allahash water plant, and they're working on getting more for other water plants.
All right, Meg, thank you for breaking that down for us. Now, the saltwater wedge is affecting more than just drinking water. Farmers in southeast Louisiana are praying the wedge doesn't continue upstream. One Belle Chase citrus farmer uses city water for his land, and he says if the wedge reaches Belle Chase, it'll ruin his business. As we mentioned, the wedge could reach the area as soon as October 3rd. At this point, farmers say they're running out of time to find solutions.
We're very concerned. We don't know what to do. You know, all of us in the same boat here. We was doing some research on osmosis, but it would cost us $150,000 to convert city water to plain water, to extract the salt out of the water.
Farmers say many of the alternatives they've explored are far too expensive, as you just heard. We'll have more on what they're facing coming up tonight on the Eyewitness News at 6. And we want to get to your local weather experts, get them involved right now because this problem is directly tied to the drought. Now, like much of Louisiana, there is a wide area upriver that is simply parched right now. And at this point, really, there's no end in sight. Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin joining us now with a closer look. What area are we talking about here?
Well, and as Meg accurately stated, it's not really the the upper Mississippi River that feeds the lower Mississippi River, which is in a more considerable drought. It's actually the Ohio River. And so we look toward the Ohio Valley, which actually isn't as bad of a drought as it is up the Mississippi. More of the water that flows past New Orleans comes from the Ohio Valley. So we look to this area for the spring floods in terms of snowfall, but at this time of year, we're looking at rainfall. And unfortunately, this is the 7-day rainfall forecast. Most of the Ohio Valley over 7 days is only expected to get maybe a little bit more than a trace of rainfall. So their dry spell will continue. Now we will see maybe a little bit more rain up the upper Mississippi River, but that doesn't flow, it flows past New Orleans, but doesn't feed as much of the volume of water that actually comes past New Orleans. Now the point at the river at the moment is at 2.4 feet and is holding steady. And looking at the extended forecast for the river, it's generally going to stay right near 3 feet. It'll kind of ebb and flow a little bit. Now, the lowest point the river has ever been in recorded history was 1.6 feet below kind of the standard gauge, and that was set in 1872. We've been talking about the river levels of 1988. That level was at its lowest point only 1/10 of a foot. So it is not quite to the levels of 1988, but it is certainly some of the lowest that we have seen in quite a while. Not much rain in our forecast, but some good news for this weekend. It will turn less humid. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes.
All right, Chris, thank you. We want to give you an idea of what Chris is talking about here. So here's what it looks like at the source of the Mississippi River. This is way up in Minnesota. Many lakes and rivers there are at historic lows. In response to the drought, officials are limiting water usage across a large portion of the state.
Until we have consistent rainfall, there's no end to this drought in sight at the moment. That's a worrying thought, because you just don't know how do you prepare for that.
One city is limiting residents to watering their lawns to every other day and even just twice a week in order to preserve the supply of groundwater. Other spots have banned watering lawns during daylight. We will have continuing coverage of the saltwater intrusion emergency. You can read more about the problem on our website, and we'll be sure to post updates on our free smartphone app as well as our social media pages.